Your mistake isn't the problem. It's the story you keep telling yourself about it. You replay it at night. You replay it in traffic. You replay it right before you fall asleep, and somehow it still feels unfinished. That voice in your head, the one that calls you careless, calls you slow, calls you the person who should have known better, you've mistaken it for discipline. You think it's keeping you sharp. You think it's the price of getting better. It isn't. In the West, we treat self-blame like accountability. In Japan, they learned centuries ago that punishment and progress are not the same thing. You've been fixing your mistakes the wrong way your whole life, not because you're weak, not because you don't care enough, but because nobody ever taught you the difference between owning a mistake and drowning in it. There are 8 things Japanese people quietly refuse to say to themselves after they fail, and once you hear them, you'll understand why your inner voice has been getting it wrong for years. Here's what's coming. Number 4 is the one that quietly runs your whole life, even though you've never once said it out loud. Most people in the West never realize they're doing it until someone points it out, and by then, it's already shaped a decade of decisions. Number 7 is going to feel uncomfortable, not because it's harsh, because it's the opposite of harsh, and some part of you has been taught that gentleness with yourself is a kind of laziness. And Number 8 isn't really about mistakes at all. It's going to undo everything you thought you understood about the first 7, quietly, without warning, the way the truest things always do. And if you're watching this, you already know what I mean. You felt that moment where one idea rearranges everything that came before it. So stay with this. Let each one land before you move to the next, because by the end, you won't just think differently about your last mistake, you'll think differently about the next one too. Stay until the end, because the last one isn't really about mistakes at all. Number 1, the reflex. You spill the coffee, you send the email to the wrong person, you forget the thing you swore you'd remember, and before you've even finished the sentence in your head, the verdict is already in. I'm so stupid. It happens fast, faster than thought almost. In the West, this reflex feels like ownership, like taking responsibility. We've been taught that calling ourselves out, even cruelly, means we're serious about fixing things. But here's what nobody talks about. Insulting yourself isn't the same as understanding yourself. One shuts the door on the mistake, the other opens it. In Japan, there's a practice called Hansei. It means structured self-reflection, looking calmly at what happened, without judgment, the way an engineer studies a bridge that failed, not to punish the bridge, to understand the pressure that broke it. Hansei doesn't ask, "What's wrong with me?" It asks, "What happened, exactly, and what does it teach me?" Mistakes become information, not identity, not evidence of who you are at your core, just data about what didn't work this time. This is the part that changes how you see everything else. The spilled coffee isn't a verdict on your worth. It's a data point about a shaky table, a rushed morning, a hand that needed one more second. You are not the mistake. You are the person collecting evidence about how to avoid it next time. And once you stop confusing the two, something quieter takes over. Not carelessness, clarity. But that's just the beginning, because the next mistake most people make happens before anything even goes wrong. Number 2, the hindsight trap. The deal falls through. The relationship ends the way you half suspected it might. The diagnosis comes back different than you hoped, and your mind rushes backward, searching for the moment you should have seen it coming. I should have known better. It sounds reasonable. It even sounds wise, like the kind of thing a careful person says. But underneath it is a quiet, impossible demand that you should have had information you simply didn't have at the time. Hindsight isn't foresight. It just wears the same coat. In Japan, there's a phrase for this. Shikata ganai. It means it cannot be helped. Not resignation, not giving up. A clear-eyed acknowledgement that some outcomes were never fully within your control, no matter how carefully you'd studied the situation. Most people in the West hear that phrase and mistake it for passivity. It isn't. Shikata ganai is a release valve, not a surrender. It lets you set down the weight of an outcome you were never actually steering alone. You didn't have a crystal ball. You had the information available to a reasonable person at a reasonable moment doing their reasonable best. That's not a failure of judgment. That's just what it means to be human, moving forward through time, instead of backward through certainty. And here's what changes once you let that phrase in. The guilt stops circling the same 3 minutes of the past. It finally has somewhere to land. But knowing what you couldn't control is only half the work. The harder question is what you do with the part you actually can. Number 3, the comparison spiral. You watch someone else bounce back in a week, a new job, a new routine, a new version of themselves, posted online like it happened overnight. And you're still sitting with the wreckage of your own mistake, wondering why you're not further along by now. I'm behind everyone else. It feels true because it feels measurable. Everyone else seems to have a timeline, and yours looks slower, messier, further from the finish line you never agreed to run toward in the first place. In Japan, there's a concept that quietly dismantles this entire idea. It's called Shoshin, beginner's mind. It's the understanding that true mastery means staying open, curious, and unashamed of starting over, the way a true beginner always is. A tea master with 40 years of practice still approaches each ceremony as if it's the first one, not because they lack skill, because expertise done honestly never stops beginning again. Starting over isn't falling behind. It's the only way anyone has ever actually moved forward. The people who look ahead of you aren't finished. They're just further into their own separate beginning, one you can't see from the outside. You've been living with this comparison for years. Japan solved it centuries ago, in a tea house with a single quiet idea. There is no finish line, only the next fresh start. Your pace was never behind. It was just yours. But before you can trust your own pace, you have to stop believing something even more damaging, something about who a mistake makes you. Number 4, the one that runs quietly underneath everything else. One mistake happens, and somewhere in your mind, a much larger sentence gets written. Not, "I made an error," something heavier, something that sounds more like a verdict on your entire existence. "This means I'm a failure." It's rarely said out loud. It doesn't have to be. It just sits there, coloring how you see the next decision, the next relationship, the next attempt at anything that matters to you. In the West, we often build our self-worth like a scoreboard, one column for wins, one for losses, and a single bad entry can feel like it erases everything above it. But in Japan, imperfection isn't treated as a flaw in the system. It is the system. This is Wabi-Sabi, the practice of finding beauty in things that are imperfect, incomplete, or aging. A cracked bowl, a weathered wooden gate, a life with visible seams. Wabi-Sabi doesn't hide the crack. It doesn't pretend the crack never happened. It simply refuses to believe the crack is the whole story. And this is the part that changes how you see everything else. You are not a finished object waiting to be ruined by one flaw. You were never supposed to be flawless in the first place. Nobody was. The failure was never you. It was the belief that you had to be perfect to be worthy of anything at all. But what we're about to cover next takes this even further, into territory most people in the West have never even considered. Because there's a difference between accepting your flaws and actually using them to get better, and almost nobody explains how. Before we go any further, if any of this is landing, take a moment right now to notice which of these 4 you've already been telling yourself today. Number 5, the myth of harshness. You've probably believed this one the longest, that the sharper the self-criticism, the faster the improvement, that if you just push harder, judge harder, expect more from yourself, the mistake won't happen again. I need to be harder on myself to improve. It sounds like discipline, it feels like the responsible thing to say, but harshness and improvement aren't actually the same engine. They just get mistaken for each other over and over in almost every self-help book you've ever read. In Japan, there's a completely different model for getting better, and it has nothing to do with force. It's called Kaizen, the practice of continuous, tiny improvements made every single day. Kaizen doesn't ask for punishment, it asks for precision. A 1% adjustment here, a slightly better habit there. No shame required, no dramatic overhaul, just small changes repeated so consistently they eventually become unrecognizable from where you started. This is the one idea that makes everything else on this list actually work, because harshness burns out. It demands an emotional price you can't keep paying, and eventually you stop trying just to stop the pain of trying. Kaizen doesn't burn out. It barely asks anything of you at all, one day at a time, which is exactly why it lasts. Before we go any further, take a moment right now. Think of one small 1% adjustment you could make today, not as punishment, but as practice. Because the next mistake on this list isn't about moving forward at all. It's about something you've been carrying that was never meant to be permanent. Number 6. The one that convinces you shame is forever. Something happens, publicly, privately, it doesn't matter which, and a quiet certainty settles in that this feeling, this embarrassment, this weight is simply how things are now, permanently. I'll never live this down. It feels less like a thought and more like a fact, as if the shame has fused itself to you, the way a stain sets into fabric if you wait too long to wash it out. But nothing about that feeling was ever built to last. Not the shame, not the judgment, not even the people who were watching, most of whom forgot within the week. In Japan, there's a concept that holds this truth with a kind of tenderness most of us were never taught. It's called mano no aware, the gentle awareness of impermanence, the understanding that things move us precisely because they don't stay. A cherry blossom is beautiful for exactly this reason. It falls within days. Nobody mourns that. They walk beneath it, grateful, knowing the falling is the point. Your shame was never a cherry blossom in bloom forever. It was already falling the moment it started, whether you could feel it happening or not. What they discovered might surprise you. The Japanese don't fight impermanence. They let it comfort them. The bad feeling passes because everything passes, the good feelings too, which is exactly why both are worth noticing while they're here. You won't feel this way in a year. You may not even feel this way in a month, but there's one more thing standing between you and actually believing that, and it has to do with who you've been hiding this mistake from. Number 7. The instinct to disappear. The moment a mistake feels big enough, something in you starts calculating who can never find out. You rehearse the cover story. You smooth over the details. You convince yourself that hiding it is the same thing as handling it. I have to hide this from everyone. It feels like protection, like damage control. But concealment doesn't actually process anything. It just puts the mistake in a locked room inside you, where it keeps its full weight, undisturbed, for as long as you keep the door shut. In Japan, there's a very different approach, and it might be the most uncomfortable one on this list. It's called Naikan, a structured self-reflection practice built around 3 quiet questions, often guided by a mentor or shared within a trusted community. Naikan doesn't ask you to hide anything. It asks you what you received from others, what you gave in return, and what trouble you may have caused, answered honestly, without flinching, and often spoken out loud to someone else. This is the part most people in the West never realize. Exposure, done in a safe and guided way, isn't the danger. Concealment is. The secret you're protecting is usually protecting nothing except your own discomfort with being fully seen. Naikan doesn't ask you to punish yourself in front of others. It asks you to finally stop carrying the mistake completely alone. And this is the part that changes how you see everything else on this list so far. Every idea you've heard until now, the reflection, the release, the beginner's mind, the small improvements, the impermanence, all of it works best in the open, not the dark. But there's one more thing on this list, and it doesn't just add to everything you've just learned, it rewrites it. Number 8, the last one, and the one that isn't really about mistakes at all. Something breaks, a relationship, a plan, a version of your life you'd quietly been counting on, and the thought arrives with total certainty, final, absolute, like a door slamming somewhere you can't reach anymore. I ruined everything. In the West, we treat broken things as damage to be erased. We hide the crack, we replace what's shattered, we move forward pretending the break never happened, as if healing means returning to some untouched original version of ourselves. In Japan, there's a practice that takes the opposite approach entirely, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a mistake the same way again. It's called Kintsugi. When a piece of pottery breaks, it isn't thrown away, and it isn't quietly repaired to hide the damage. The cracks are filled with gold, not to disguise the break, to highlight it deliberately as the most valuable part of the object's entire history. The bowl isn't in spite of the break. The bowl is because of it. This is the part that changes how you see everything else you've heard today. Hansei, Shikata, Shoshin, Wabi-Sabi, Kaizen, Mono no Aware, Naikan. Every single one of them was quietly preparing you for this, not to erase your mistakes, not even just to accept them, to let them become the gold. The version of you that exists after the break isn't a damaged copy of who you were before. It's someone with visible proof of having survived something, repaired with care instead of shame. You didn't ruin everything. You just haven't finished filling in the gold yet. 8 things Japanese people quietly refuse to say to themselves, not because they never make mistakes, because they learned generations ago that the voice you use afterward matters more than the mistake itself. None of this was ever about becoming someone who never fails. That person doesn't exist in Japan or anywhere else. It was about the story, the one you tell yourself in the quiet minutes after something goes wrong, whether that story sounds like an insult or sounds like information, whether it locks the door or finally opens it. You've been carrying old, borrowed rules about what a mistake means, rules nobody actually agreed to, rules that were never true in the first place. Hansei instead of self-attack, Shikata instead of impossible hindsight, Shoshin instead of comparison, Wabi-Sabi instead of a scoreboard, Kaizen instead of harshness, Mono no Awada instead of permanent shame, Naikan instead of hiding, and Kintsugi turning the break itself into something worth keeping. If any of this gave you one thing to think about differently, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And subscribe, because every week we go a little deeper into the quiet wisdom Japan has been living for centuries. Your mistake was never the problem. You don't need to be mistake-free. You just need a kinder story.